I can actually be the person I'm trying to be as a creator. The fact that the data is virtually open, that anyone can access, that is not centralized behind the doors of, say, Google, it means that this ecosystem of tools has to develop without considering ownership of the data in mind. Meaning anything that they do to make sure there is a differentiator from them to any other application has to be based on anything but the data, which is kind of the opposite that has been happening for the past 20 years, right? Facebook, Google, Instagram, what do they have? They have data. And they just so happens to also do a little bit of UI work here and there, right? That is minimally acceptable for us to give them the data they want. Now in Nostr, that is not there. You can't own people's data. It doesn't work like that. Even if you are a relay operator, people can just move to another relay. It doesn't really work in the way people usually think in the traditional sense. So in a sense, say capitalism will push these apps and these clients forward on the way we want by competing with each other on the best features, the best UI, the best experience, instead of what we don't want, just isolating themselves and the data they capture out from everybody else. That will never happen in Nostr.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 862252, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up, and in this case, that is Nostr. Because today, my guest is Vitor Pamplona, the creator of the all-in-one Nostr client for Android, Amethyst. We talk about Nostr a lot in this episode, obviously, so if you are already a Nostrich, you are going to love it and learn a lot. And if you haven't heard of Nostr yet, or you have heard about it, but you still haven't got around to setting up your NPub, hopefully this episode will be the spark you need to get started. You can find links in the show notes for some great Nostr resources to help you get started, and to follow Vitor and myself on Nostr. Before we dive in, do me a favor and subscribe to the Bitcoin Podcast wherever you're watching or listening. Give the show a boost on Fountain if you find it valuable. Check out bitcoinpodcast.net for episodes and additional resources. Grab discount links in the show notes for my kick-ass sponsor Bitbox and other partners. And send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net if you have feedback or if you're interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Without further ado, let's get into this Nostr talk with Vitor Pamplona. Great to have you here, man. Again, it's cool. Like, you feel like you really get to know people through Nostr, even though, you haven't, it's not like you've known people since childhood or anything like that, but it feels like years happen in days on Nostr. I mean, just keeping up with memes alone is a struggle sometimes.
Yep. And it feels like that in development as well. We start doing things, and when we realize there are 3-4 other people doing something similar and coming up with their own concepts, and so it all moves really quickly in this space.
Do you find just that Nostr is unique in that regard just because it is open? It's like anyone can build anything. There's not obviously a lot of centralized coordination. So like you said, you may be working on something and you find out, oh, hey, Kieran or, Will already was working on that and they found a good solution for it, or vice versa.
Yeah, so I think about in the fuck you money kind of analogy, right, for Bitcoin. We have the same thing, but it's like fuck you data or the rest of it that is not money. Developers in Nostr tend to have this very clear thinking that they can just do what they want, and as long as they publish in the format that Nostr requires, which is this event structure, then every other client can read it. And as long as they follow some very basic rules, it's going to work. It's going to show up in the other side. And the user of the other client will ask that to be rendered. So it's like I can do whatever I want from a client standpoint. I can just create any other type of application that I would like to have and offer my users. And if it becomes big enough, the same users will start asking the same feature in other clients, or at least a version of that, at least like an acknowledgement that that feature exists, right? So for instance, if it's highlighted, for instance, that has these quotes that you can just, select a phrase on the website, and you can create a quote and show that to your followers. Today, I think you can only do that in Highlighter itself, in that client, but it will be rendered in many other clients. It shows up everywhere. Why? Because Highlighter started creating those events, and everybody was just like, well, since it's there, you might as well just, just render it. And then later, they get into the same place, which is this NIP repo we have, where we just try to hash out some small differences on how to do things, and it's all about just the details there. But the idea is already there. It's already out. People are already using it. And because of that, you kind of have this bottom-up approach where people can create whatever they want. And then if it gets used, it becomes the standard, and other Nostr clients start to follow it.
It is kind of interesting that, you have, it's basically user-driven. I don't want to say user-driven development, but in many ways it is. It's not that the users are mandating, saying, because if you listen to every request a user makes, like you never sleep. I don't know how much you sleep anyway. That was one of the questions that I saw on Nostr was, ask him how much he actually sleeps. But I found that Nostr developers have been they're very aware, like they're very tuned in to the ecosystem. They're actively using Nostr all the time. They're not just using their own client, they're using other clients, and they're listening to the users out there, trying to figure out, okay, what are people excited about? And like you said, okay, is this something that enough people are using where the folks that are using my client are going to see a nice benefit if I implement this? And if I don't implement it, they may go to another client where it is already implemented. Is that kind of how you look at things? Like, is there a critical mass that you look for of interest, or is it also kind of like what you think? Because you are a Nostr user yourself. You're not just a developer, but you're a user as well.
And your point is well taken. Every developer in this field is using the application they developed almost all the time. So it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that the application will work because the owner of that application is actually the main developer, which is very different from any other corporate development that I have been involved with. For instance, that I might develop something but never actually used it myself. And this is only possible because Nostr is so simple, right? You can't, like I was even playing this game with folks at the conference, at the Bitcoin conference, on like how big does your team need to be in Nostr, because it doesn't feel like it needs to be much bigger than one or two people working on each one of the versions of the app, right? If you have a mobile version and a web version is a little bit different, but just for a mobile version, then 1, 2, 3 people max should be able to code everything they need to code to make that application work. There's no need for larger teams, especially because in this case, they are not actually controlling the data repository, which is usually where all the problems that Jack talks about all the time, all the censorship limitations are still there with the relays. For us clients, we just get to use that data and they store it for us. I always say temporarily because we never know when they're going to delete it, but it's there. It's kind of managed for you. In most of the cases, it's just free. So you could use that for a while until you get enough mass as a user to pull all that data into something you control, and then take the devices and the data and your keys with you anywhere you want. There is literally no way to censor you in that scene.
Yeah, that's something I've been a little bit lazy on is setting up my own relay just for posterity, basically, for being able to actually have control. Because I know that, okay, I'm publishing to a number of different relays, reading and writing to a lot of these relays. I use multiple clients as well, just because I like to play around with stuff. But I've still been too lazy to set up my own relay. So I do need to get on that, because I think you're right that, yeah, it's one thing to have, you have your npub and you have your nsec, right? And that's giving you a certainly a better solution for identity that you can take elsewhere, not like on Twitter or Facebook or, TikTok. But you're not really going all the way unless you also have that backup of everything that you've published on there. Because, heaven forbid, like all the relays I use decide to just wipe all that data. Oh, that's gone. I mean, yeah. I don't have it anymore, and that would be sad, because I've so many great memes, have been posted along the way. It would be a sad thing to lose them. So I need to get on.
Very serious, right? So, for instance, we were doing some experiments in health data inside of Nostr. So now you have your prescriptions, your connections with the doctor, all the communication back and forth, all your lab results, all your allergies, all your medications are there. So now if you lose something, it could become a problem, right? Because it's not there, you need to do it again, or maybe you went to a new doctor and they don't have any other information and they missed a few things that were supposed to be there and not there anymore. So in that kind of mindset, it becomes more and more important to establish your own relay, or at least buy the relay service from an entity that you trust, and that there is some terms and conditions there is some security for you as a user to make sure the data will be there no matter what happens, right? And from there, I think that gave me a lot of additional understanding of this. Like, okay, so yeah, Nostr gives you control over the keys, which is essentially an identity. You can let people know who you are, and then whatever you sign, they know it's true, that it's you. But it doesn't really provide a very solid platform for hosting that data, mostly because the relays don't have a revenue model baked into the protocol. They have to charge in some other way outside the protocol as a layer 2 kind of thing, that if they are one of these relays that won't store data forever, then they will charge you some amount just to do that service for you. And that's good and bad, right? Because unlike, say, something like Ethereum that I think we all played with at the time, the data would just stay there in the blockchain forever. It's like Bitcoin would stay there forever, right? It has a cost. The scarcity is a problem. And so it's kind of baked in. The protocol solves that problem, but not for everybody, not for all the applications, not for everything we want to do with it. And yeah, if you have something that requires that type of scarcity, it might make sense to have a token or so on, but most applications out there don't actually require it. And in fact, it goes against the application itself, because you want people using it. You want people generating content on whatever you do. And if you have a blockchain limiting you, then there is a certain ceiling to this whole process. So, pros and cons of Nostr. But I do think, as we navigate this idea of having a personal relay, we'll get closer and closer to reality. It will be something similar to, say, buying an Apple iCloud or a Google Drive kind of thing, that you just keep your photos there forever.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is that there are at least already some options for doing that in a, quote, more sovereign way. I believe sovereignty is a spectrum. I don't think, much like Bitcoin's issued supply will asymptotically approach 21 million, it'll never quite get there. I think that's the same with sovereignty, because you can say, okay, I have, let's say I run my own Bitcoin node. I use, open source solutions. I've personally verified all of the code, all these things, but still it's well, did you build your smartphone? Did you build your computer? Did you source all the parts?
Will it explode or not?
Right. Exactly.
We don't know these days.
Well, and so that's the thing. It's and then it's okay, well, you're sovereign in that part of your life, but okay, do you grow all of your own food? Do you mill all of your own lumber? It's the iPencil thing. There's so much complexity that goes even into the simplest things like a pencil, that it's almost impossible for one person to actually do that in all parts of their life. It is impossible. I mean, you can try, but again, so sovereignty is that spectrum. And I think the more tools that are available to help people make those sovereign jumps to move along that spectrum more easily, the more people are going to use it. Because a lot of times it is a convenience factor, right? We trade off a little bit of privacy, or we trade off a little bit of security, sovereignty. We trade it for convenience. And, that's why
frankly,
Gmail is free,
a
because
requirement for life,
Yeah.
Because we trust our families with lots of things, right? Lots of emotional content there. I don't think you can say that you can get rid of those. You kind of want that relationship. You want that facility around you. And with software and systems, it's kind of the same. You want to be able to choose somebody to trust to solve a problem that you don't care as much as something else that you might spend a lot of time, investigating and verifying yourself. And it's kind of like there are multiple layers to this, because, for instance, if you just use an open source Nostr client, somebody's looking at that code. You can probably trust that code is doing what's supposed to do. Certainly from client's perspective, we try to be transparent as possible on that one. But regardless, it is there. It's different than a closed source Nostr client, for instance, where that manufacturer can then say that things have been validated but haven't. You know what I mean? They can't create posts where they can convince the user that post is coming from another friend of theirs that they're following, even though there's no signature attached to it. Because you're not seeing the code, just believing that they're doing what's supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I have so many things I want to get into with you today. Before I get too deep into these, I do want to just start us off a little bit with just kind of your background a little bit. And I always like to ask this in the form of a simple question. Take it any way you want, long version or short version, however you'd like to do it. But just, who are you? How did you get here today to be right now, building the Nostr client for Android, at least the most prominent one. I think some others have sprung up, but yours has certainly, I think, been the most well-known and most used, most downloaded. How did you get here?
So I'm a computer scientist by background. Did all my training back in Brazil. Did an internship inside the MIT Media Lab, where I got a few new ideas there. One of them was the early technology behind a medical device company that I spun off from that laboratory. So I spent about the last 15 years or so leading as CEO and CTO of that medical device company that came from my PhD at MIT. That learning process of working with investors and trying to figure out what is actually worth building and what's not. I was doing with Vision Care, we were doing a device that you can test your eyes for glasses, to get those glasses numbers, the 6 numbers that you get, on a VR device. So very unique, very different, very, very ahead of its time. We developed the technology, we shipped it out to the market. I say we survived for 15 years as a small company from our own revenues and so on. And then it hit me, yeah, this is good, but the market's so small, we're going to stay like this kind of forever. So I had a decision to make. Do I want to do something bigger? Or do you want to stick around with just a smaller company that provides tools for doctors, and they're doing something interesting with them, but it's not really, game changing. So during the pandemic, I joined PathCheck, which was this new foundation at MIT again to deal with the pandemic somehow. It was February 2020. We already knew a pandemic was coming. This was a certain fact for us. I already knew that the company I was working for, if the pandemic arrived, would be dead in the first weeks, because my customer base was mostly based on small business and mom and pop shops in the US, which, as we know, they got destroyed on this. So we knew that this thing would come, and we needed solutions, right? Nobody knew anything about COVID. We needed solutions. Give me something that might work. So we came up with one of the early versions of the exposure notification systems that Apple later on ended up using, Apple and Google. and then later on the vaccine QR codes, which, funny enough, the QR code itself is a Nostr event, essentially. It is a payload that is signed by a public key, and you can verify on itself. It's like a Nostr event without the relay. Like the QR code is the relay, essentially. So users will transmit this left and right without, completely offline, right, without having any connection to a relay, and just show their health data. And then it just so happens that government used this, which I think is a cool idea, to transfer health information from person to person, and brought the hammer on and just said, now everybody have to use this. And by the way, we are using this to limit your access to places. And I'm like, that's not what it was supposed to do. But then it also hit me. They could do the same thing with Bitcoin. If they want to just trace all of our transactions, well, okay, now you all have to use Bitcoin. Every transaction is on chain. And we know how to follow every single one of you. We can't block it, but we can surveil you, right? So I was like, okay, so technology is in a place right now where we can develop everything that we think it could be in terms of sovereignty and verification and making sure this thing is trustless as to the best of our knowledge. In the end, there's always, a government that can say, you know what, let's use the thing that they did, that they think is good, and they'll just start turn that thing into something evil that just to use to track people and do everything we want with it. So with Nostr, it was kind of like this phase in my head where we went from let's do decentralized, medical device thing that everybody is in the regular world happy with, and to a place where, well, let's just decentralize everything, and then discovering that even if you do decentralize everything, there's still a risk that government can take over the thing you did. And with Nostr, it became something that is way more difficult to do just because of this idea of the relays being so decentralized and so away from each other. Yeah, they can still require, they can do a system where, if they see that Nostr is successful, they can say, now you need a Nostr event that is signed by somebody else that has your keys in there in order to access, the Red Sox game. They can create those rules even with Nostr today. But because we have so many relays out there, it's a little less difficult for them to track, right, what's going on. And and this whole story ends up with me developing the new DM spec for Nostr, which is, I don't know if you remember, but Nipple 4, the previous one, essentially displays the metadata so you can see who is talking to who on any relay. And the one we designed, it just displays that you are receiving things from people. And things doesn't necessarily mean it's a DM. The time that you're receiving doesn't really match with the time they are sending. So it's way harder to just track things down. Yeah, they can still try, but it's not as easy as it was before. Anyway, long story to say that you can, life is all about those decisions where we take and we build products and then we realize, this thing could have been better. And at this point, at least, I do think the place Nostr is right now is one of these, it's better than any other technology stack that I have seen out there.
I mean, that I love hearing that as a non-developer, because it's like, oh, good. I'm using the right protocol as a non-technical person. So I'm curious, what was the impetus though behind you deciding to build Amethyst? Like when did you make that decision? What was the spur where you said, oh, I'm going to build an Android client?
So this was like December 2022. I had just purchased an iPhone just to use Demos, the only client that was working at the time. All the web clients weren't really good, but after I bought it, I was like, what am I even doing? Because I am an Android developer. I can do this. I can just build one, right? And it took me like 6 or 7 days to get in the mindset of, yeah, I'm actually building this. I was on vacations in Brazil. I was just like, okay, let me start this. And it took me like 5 days to build the entire Twitter client as we see today. And then another 5 days to just solve some of the bugs and ship it. And then from that moment forward, it became very clear to me that, one, that application was missing in the market and people were kind of crying for it. And I just kept going with it. So it's really like one of those ideas where, I don't know if you have been through this, but in product development, you kind of test many things all the time. And I love doing little tests everywhere. And most of the time, like 99% of the time, nothing happens. People kind of hate the product, or, yeah, it works, but it's not really the thing I need. It's like not there. And with Amethyst, it was just like, we did this, it worked, people use it. We got, 200,000 users in the first months. And I'm like, okay, there's something here, and we need to just expand it to the extreme we can take it, right? And that was the moment where Nostr was just starting. There were just a few nips, and it was mostly based on social networks, like Twitter-style interfaces. It didn't do anything else, Nostr in general, even though there were other stuff in the name. I was like, well, I'm going to start just pulling everything I can. And because we had so many users, we were just like giving users away to these new ideas and new clients. So there was, the very common one was this communities client, Reddit-like clients, that we just helped kickstart them into the existence by adding into Amethyst, but not allowing them or our users to create communities. Not allowing because, we just didn't have time for. But the way we were doing it is essentially saying, you know what? There is this other client. You can create that and you can see things on Amethyst, and everybody that wants to join your community can do everything through Amethyst so that you get your users that you want. Meanwhile, you can start enhancing your own product. And just like that, we started doing with every single idea we could come up with, and just enabling new clients, new structures, new systems out there. Obviously, it's not that everything would work, but because most of them were very new and exciting, I think many of them are still out there trying to make their idea work, and we still support them. So that's kind of the path for Amethyst. Like, that's why it became this, all-in-one kind of app that kind of tries to do everything in a Twitter client, in a Twitter interface, but not really replacing the specialty clients that those other use cases would usually have more abilities and more interesting structures for.
I love it because I joined the Amethyst beta because I for one reason or another, I have a lot of Android devices. My daily driver is my iPhone, but I've got a few Android devices on my desk. So I had downloaded Amethyst on the beta like right away, just because I was like, this is cool. And I remember using it from the start, and it of course it's a Nostr client, a Twitter clone Nostr client, so it had some of the same feels. But from the start, you guys did try to do some different things, and now I hadn't used it in a little while. I must be honest, because honestly, I'd lost one of my Androids that I like the most. I found it again, and I was just playing around with Amethyst again, and like it is very nice when you go in there and you see. First of all, you've got your main kind of short form feed, which includes everything else as well. But then what I really liked is the videos tab that you guys have.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a really, really nice feature because you see that TikTok figured something out very powerful. Like so powerful to the point where Instagram copied them with Reels. Twitter has copied it now with just if you go into any video in Twitter or X, excuse me, and you keep you can scroll forever, and people like that. Like and on those centralized platforms, you're also being fed stuff algorithmically that is meant to enrage you and bait you and keep you there. But at least on Nostr, you're getting stuff that is just served up. Like it's I don't know if you have any algorithm working in the background for that yet. I know there's a lot of algorithms or something I want to talk with you about a little later. But I think that's really nice, providing people with those experiences that are familiar, but you're doing it in a Nostr way, and I think that's really powerful. And I'm kind of curious if you have other, let's say, hidden features within Amethyst that maybe people aren't aware of, that are a little bit trickier to get to, or that, things that you've kind of snuck in there but haven't made super public. Is there anything like that in there, or do you try to make everything pretty, to the forefront, pretty evident?
So everything has a reference on the screen. The only things that are missing are about setting up translations and other things that are fairly complicated. We just haven't developed the screens yet. But you can see that just today, for instance, several users discovered that you can edit posts on Amethyst. And it was there since the beginning. You just click the 3-button setting thing on the post, and one of the items is just edit. If it's your post, you can just edit, which essentially creates a new event and replicates the older one there. But again, that it's one of the things that I think it helps a lot. The app doesn't try to teach everything at once in the beginning. It just kind of overflow you with information. Like, we don't even talk about NSECs when you create an account. You hit the button, create, you put a name, and that's it. You're inside the app. Like, there's no other information that doesn't say what Nostr is. There's nothing there. As you navigate the process of working and trying to use the app, usually with a friend, because these days everything is through word of mouth anyway, you start to discover these features. You start to discover that you can change your reactions, the emojis that you can react posts with, or that you can set up different amounts for the zap. And then you discover that there is a single-click zap button through Nostr Wallet Connect. But I mean, just to get them to be in that mindset, to have a single click, they need to know what a zap is. They need to know what a Lightning transaction is. They need to know what these things are, how custodial they are, and so on. Because we don't have a wallet inside the Amethyst itself, they must have a companion app that serves as a wallet. And then the Nostr Wallet Connect just connects to it, right? And just pays through that wallet. And the same way it receives it. So I do think we are really proud of that idea of just slowly progressing the user into this space, because we have been, at least we have seen in Bitcoin, where things flow too fast to the user and they just give up. It's just like, it's just too much. Like, yeah, sure, there's all this hard money problem. Like, I really just want to pay my friend here. Like, I don't want to know all this thing. So when they are ready, we take that extra step. And that usually happens, which is funny because it usually happens in the social layer. Meaning there is nothing in the app to kind of train you to do the app itself. They start asking in Nostr, on a chat, or in their videos, and then somebody else will reply and say, yeah, you have this button that does this, and you can put this other thing. So it uses the social network for its own training, instead of developing the training materials. Like, if I was in my company back in the day, I would just create 3 or 4 pages of documentation that you would read when you get the device, and you just have to follow it strictly to the letter. Otherwise, you're going to get wrong results. And if you get wrong results, then we are not liable, right? But this is open source. Wrong results are just fine. So you can actually explore this new idea, or I'm not sure if it's new, but this idea of using the network, using the power of the social layer in the favor of the app. But in order to do so, you need to have these kind of hidden features that people can talk about. They can feel proud of themselves for even knowing about it, because it's not in the menu, it's not in the screen, it's not a visual effect in the app. And that's kind of, I think, how the conversation gets started these days. Like, I receive at least, 50 to 100 Amethyst-related posts where people just are trying to teach each other on how to do certain things. And I just love it. I just go there and I start zapping people, because that's what I kind of want to see happening more organically than like through a process where, say I or the team behind Amethyst teaches them what to do, how to feel, when to use it. It's like those things are not required if society is already there with them to help them out.
The great thing about open source solutions built on Bitcoin and Nostr is that you don't have to trust anyone. you can verify for yourself. And speaking of open source companies building on top of these protocols, go to bitbox.swiss/walker and use the promo code WALKER for 5% off the fully open source Bitcoin-only Bitbox O2 hardware wallet or anything else in their store. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. The Bitbox team is honestly awesome. I'm super proud to be working with them, and they've been a sponsor of the Bitcoin podcast since very early on. They build easy-to-use, secure, open-source solutions to keep your Bitcoin safe from government confiscation on the one hand, but Bitbox is also one of the only 2 wallets to actually address the dark Skippy vulnerability. So you are in luck. And I really want to emphasize this point. The Bitbox O2 is easy as hell to use. And that's the same whether you're brand new to Bitcoin and it's your first time setting up a hardware wallet and maybe you're a little nervous, or if you are a well-seasoned psychopath and you've done this like 69 times. Again, it is fully open source and Bitcoin only. There is no need to trust me or to trust Bitbox. You can go to Bitbox's GitHub and verify that for yourself. And when you go to bitbox.swiss/walker and use the promo code WALKER, not only do you get 5% off, you also help support this fucking podcast. So thank you. I think that's a really interesting approach. It's kind of a almost a choose your own adventure type of thing. You know, how do you want to use this client? And because I'm always very fascinated by onboarding and the different thought processes that go in there for different clients. Like I try to just, sometimes I'll create just a burner account, just to like try out a new client again. If I haven't done it in a while, haven't done their onboarding in a while, and I'll do that just to see, okay, what's the same from what I remember? What's different? How are people, doing this? Is there a couple of screens that you page through first that you're, reading this or that? Is it self-evident from the UI, what kind of where you should flow, what you should do? And so I think that's really interesting. And the point that you mentioned just about kind of encouraging that, first of all, encouraging discovery of the application through social interaction with the protocol itself is really fascinating, because you're basically saying, okay, if you want to use this, like ask people, ask a question. And that's the beautiful thing about Nostr. And I don't think it's necessarily just a function of a smaller scale. I think this is something that will continue even once Nostr scales up, because I think people like to help others with things they themselves are excited about. And when you're excited about something, you want to show somebody else, oh, here's a mistake I made here. Make sure you don't do this, little things. I think that's great. And I'm kind of curious as well. You mentioned that obviously you're trying to pull in a lot of different functionality and features into Amethyst and really be not let's say a marketplace for these different features, but to have one home for them. And maybe you have some limited capabilities with them, but at least you can have access to those features. Are there features that either you are personally would like to develop or that you are seeing other people starting to work on that you're particularly excited about, things that you think are like, wow, this is something that's really gonna get users excited?
Yeah, for sure. Although I'm not sure how many users will be excited by the ideas I have, because it's, as a dev, I can tell you what I think usually doesn't matter. It's like it's I can see what the users are doing and then react to it, and those things work better than devs trying to come up with things to do. So for instance, one of the cool ideas, right? One of the cool ideas that we have been talking about between the devs is this notion of verifiable computation. So now you have verifiable data. In Nostr, you can verify any data people send to you, and you can say this came from the right person. Nobody changed the data in the middle of the way. The next step is something that's called like a verifiable script. So you have a piece of code that is signed by the author of that code that can run, right, on itself, like a smart contract, but in Nostr. And this is already there. I think Will has a few new ideas in there, and there are 3 or 4 versions of it out there. But it's essentially a script. Once you have data and you have script, you need something to run the script with the data, right? But because usually if the script is too long, it's too complicated to run, it will not be run on the phone. So you have to believe that somebody else that is running this code is actually doing what's supposed to do, what the code told them to do. Because there's no way to check, right, if it's doing correctly or not. Until these days, where we had the discussion with the zero knowledge proof folks, which are usually around Ethereum, all the crypto shitcoin space, because they don't have anywhere else to go, basically, because they found that that's the thing that they need to do to sustain their business. And I'm like, well, but now we have Nostr. There's something different there. And what they can do, both ZK Snarks and Starks, which are the two main categories of tools that can do this, they can say, you know what, you had a piece of code that looked like this, and you have data that looked like that. I run the code for you, and the result is here. And by the way, here is the proof that I run the code without changing it. So I can externalize this processing to anything else. Say if you want, I don't know, the top tweets of the day, but you want to do that in such a way that you don't trust any machine out there that is processing for this data for you. You can send the data, you can send the script, and just say process it for me. And when they return, you will know verifiably true from cryptography. So it's truly a verification process that they have not changed the algorithm you told them to run into. That there's no additional answers, there is no ads, because they might have put their own things, their own spins on the data. And you can check this. And once you have these three components in place, now you can do a lot of different things. Because now phones are not bound by their computation anymore. You can do this with AI systems that you don't trust. You can do this without exposing. So if you have the data in one custodial system and another, and the scripts into another custodial system, like one relay has the data, one relay has the script, the person running the two that needs the data and the script doesn't need to know what the data is and what the script is. You just send the hashes, the things that represent the two together. You send them to the runner, and the runner will run and give you a proof that it did run that without knowing what was the input, all the data that you had in there, without knowing what the script is doing. You just know some equations. It's like an AI system. You have these weights, and you don't really know what it does until you actually run several times and figure out like what's actually doing. So you could add all these things into Nostr without having the scarcity of a blockchain. And I think that idea is now coming back into some good hands, right? Because it was basically taken over by the shitcoin stuff. And now that we have some way of doing that without requiring the blockchain, I think they can come back and they can have a really interesting or just different dynamics on what we can and cannot do in Nostr. Because in the end, yeah, we can do a lot on the phone, but if we are doing AI systems, we're going to need massive numbers of computers out there executing things for users. And ZK proofs and Snarks and Starks and so on is just one of the ways to try to get there. And I'm sure we're going to get there. It's just about, figuring out the details on this, if it's actually private, if it's not, if it's secure, if it's not, and so on.
In this case, would the model basically, because obviously there needs to be an incentive for whoever is actually doing the computation, is this something that you would just pay for essentially the user would pay for by zapping, like to basically initiate this request, you would just zap along with whatever you want computed, and then that's paying them for the computational power that they're expending, and you get back your proof? Is that the general idea?
That's right, yes. So we do have that model today, as people might know as DVMs, data vending machines, which is one of the NIPs for Nostr, that you can just ask a computer to run something for you. And that something might be, generate an image, might be pick up a few posts that I would like to see based on my preferences and so on. But in all those instances today, you have to trust the DVM. You have to trust the runner is doing what's supposed to be doing and not fooling you around. Because obviously, if they are providing content to you, they can have a side partnership with one of the brands and just put their products first. Or, if they are just... It's the same with relays, for instance. Relays could do this interesting game where if you have a partnership with a brand and a Nostr client calls in for, give me all the reactions to a post that talks about, I don't know, the MacBook Pro. The relay can say, you know what? There are millions of these posts out there. Here are all the positive stuff. And wait a few minutes and then say, here are the negative things. So if you start reading and you're like, yeah, this is all positive, this is all good, let me buy this, and so on, you miss all the negative things just because of the time the relay added to send them to you. And if you don't trust that relay, then those things can actually happen. If they want to, they can make these side partnerships and kind of filter out based on that partnership, which is not really filtering, it's just like delaying some content, so they're still sending you things. But because you're not patient enough to wait for everything, it's just like you're already making a conclusion in the first 5 seconds, and then everything else doesn't really matter. We know that that's true for many things. So they can just play that game and have a few different partners, and they can probably sustain themselves without charging any user for their services. And this is why it's so important to, when you're in Nostr, to trust the relay that you are using. Always, it's a trusted relationship, because the relay can warp the way you think about things by just tweaking the timing of the post.
It is quite interesting. It's good that there are options for relays as well. If you find that one has lost your trust, you can certainly find another, and there are both paid and free options, obviously. I'm curious, this is a slight gear shift, but something that I've just been thinking a lot about myself in terms of adoption of Nostr, because I think everybody who's using Nostr right now really loves using it. It's truly it's a fun experience, both because there are so many options for you to use in terms of clients, but also because this is a novel protocol, and the people that are on here are early adopters. They're very enthused. They're excited. It's a new space for conversation, for engagement, for establishing connections. And I mean, already unconferences being spun up around it, which is just beautiful. But in terms of broader adoption, we're obviously still extremely early, very early. And I'm curious if where you sort of see next waves of adoption coming from. Because I think there are kind of a couple ways to look at this. One is adoption is going to be a force of people running away from something. They're going to be running away from authoritarian regimes, cracking down on centralized social media platforms or censoring them, whatever it may be. So running away from something very negative and finding Nostr. And we do see these little bumps kind of in user growth around various deplatforming censorship events in various countries, things like that. There's also the other avenue, which I think is running towards something. So it's where people don't necessarily, they're happy with where they are. Maybe they're a little dissatisfied with YouTube or X or Instagram, whatever it may be. But they find something in Nostr that makes them want to run toward that gets them excited to say, this is something I should be paying attention to. And I think in a lot of the first case, so running away from something, you're going to attract a lot more, let's say, dissidents, free speech advocates, various activists, things like that, which is fantastic, and that Nostr exists as a tool for that. In the latter case, where we're running towards something, I think we're dealing with more of a content creator type of, or just content consumer, but content creators, I think, bring content consumers with them. People want to go where the content is being created, where they like the content. And so I'm curious if you see, one is a push, one is a pull.
Yeah.
Where you see kind of those next waves of adoption coming from in Nostr. And then on top of that, what can clients do, or what are you thinking about in terms of kind of making those, whatever direction you're running away from something or running toward Nostr, making it more enticing for folks to come in and more accessible to them?
Yeah, so the only way to win in this space is to be better. Not in the sense that better in the sense of privacy and decentralization and all these side things we love to talk about. But for a regular user, it doesn't really matter, right? We need to be better in terms of having better content and better apps. Those are the only two things that matter. Yeah, the interesting and the reason why we're all here is, well, we are better, and it just so happens that we are private, decentralized, and self-custodial, right? So we kind of have this really good drive for ourselves to make things better. But in the end, for the average user, for the average creator out there, it is about apps that work. In case of creators, apps that help them make money, because that's their main living condition that they need to have. There's no other option, right? People are on YouTube not because YouTube has users, even though that is one of the cases, but it is because it brings them cash. And almost immediately, even if you're a smaller creator, you get something out of it. And you can get that feeling that maybe it is possible to survive on this, We have to create the same system of incentives in Nostr. I don't think we have that fleshed out yet. But if there's one thing I know is that from a creator perspective, creators are usually happy to spend money as long as the money they spend on, say, creator apps does not surpass what they receive from the network, right? So there is a limit to all of this. But if you have good apps, if you have good ideas that could serve creators out there, it just facilitates typing for regular short posts, or just make super awesome videos that short-term form that people can use and post immediately to Nostr in certain events, certain apps, and shows up everywhere kind of thing. Those applications, I do believe it can be paid. There will be business for them because they are needed by creators. I don't think you can be a creator without affording that type of equipment for yourself. At least not a good one. You can always start, but even with just short posts, like you can only go so far. At some point, you start having to manage your short posts and your real content. If you're making money on short posts, you need to have apps that help you understand why certain posts worked, why they didn't work, what types of replies, which got more, say, reactions, others got more zaps, and why is there a difference? So all those things are systems that we still need to develop for creators. For the readers, for the users, it's all about having fun. No one is here to debate, politics or the stuff that we see on Twitter that is super negative generally. They're not going to stay around for that. But if this thing starts to become a little bit of fun, and they can demonstrate some of that's why the meme movement is so important, because it touches that component of, let's make this fun. Let's have a group of friends that can have a chat and no one will bother them. Let's have some folks that will have, public posts that are talking about things that they care about. A championship of soccer, for instance, or whatever they want to talk about. And it just doesn't need to have that negativity that Twitter has. I think Twitter can survive with that negativity because of the ad platform they have behind of it. If they didn't have those ads, that everybody had just to pay for it. Imagine having to pay for something that as soon as you posted, 5 or 6 people just complaining about what you did. It's just not fun, right? So that is the type of client for readers, for viewers, for the usual consumers out there that we need to develop. And even though I am one of the clients that tries to do it all, I think the only way to get really good at this is to have multiple specialty clients on each one of the media that people want to consume. Like, yeah, Amethyst has this, TikTok-like video reels thing that you can do, but an app that only does that can be so much better, right? We know that. Like, I know that as a developer that if I could focus just in one little feature, that feature could be so exciting for users, and I can just reinforce that the learning and the fun into that ecosystem as much as I can. So apps like Amethyst, I think, moving forward, they will sustain the the core social network capabilities of Nostr, but at some point we're going to see the specialty apps kind of surpassing the group of apps, because separately each one of them will become better than any app can ever be together, combined in one. And frankly, I'm here for it. Like, it's, if that means that Amethyst will die in 10 years, so be it. If we have those better apps out there and they can do a better job than I do, let's go for it. Because, the things we care about, the, self-custodial, decentralized, and privacy, if we can do all of that while hitting these 3 items, we're done. Like, this is great. I don't need to do anything else. I can retire. I can just, go spend my time at the beach and like just use the tools everybody else is building, both free and paid, and whatever they want to do this.
So I think that's fascinating, because it's not something you would hear from a centralized platform developer typically. So you're of the opinion basically that in the kind of micro app versus super app, micro app ultimately wins in terms of user experience, just because that's all it's focusing on, is whatever that specific user experience is, and it's doing that better than any super app can. I'm wondering if there is the potential for super apps, like, Amethyst, I think, could be considered something of a super app because it does a lot of these things, to still leverage some, like, because all this stuff's being built out in the open, right? For the most part, it's being built open source. I mean, is that something that where, okay, a super app can actually become as good, even at these niche micro app parts? It can be as good as the micro app because you've been able to see, okay, I read their code. I did a little copy pasta. I changed some things to make it work for me. Is that somewhat of a possibility, or do you think it's still just that narrow focus is also something that the user perhaps wants? Like, people go to TikTok, for example, because they want to scroll through videos. They don't go there because they also want to see short form, text posts, right?
Yeah.
So is that part of the user psychology more than like, yeah, we could do it, but the user just might not want that?
Yeah. And frankly, you can see that in regular applications. Instagram, for instance, when they added the stories thing, there was some form of like user backlash because people just wanted the pictures, right? The stories is a separate client. This doesn't work together. It's like, it's what? And then Snap came over and just did that component with the disappearing videos kind of feature, and also became a big thing just because it could do that so well. So and from a dev's perspective, I can tell you that every time we try to blend these use cases into one, 2 things happen. Your app becomes an operating system. It becomes this massive things as if you had many apps inside of it, and then now you have to manage all this thing. And that's the problem. That's when usually developers drop the ball here and there, because you can't manage everything. At the same time, we already have operating systems. The Android operating system is there. You can just develop an app. So to give you more of a detail, the caching system for short form and the caching system for long form and video feeds is different. They don't share the same thing. So the backbones of the app need to be rebuilt to enable these additional features. And if you do a few of them, it's not a big problem. But once you start adding everything like we're trying to do, I'm seeing all kinds of problems now, because the NIPs are kind of managed together in the repo, and we have, a working group per se that can, kind of use the same things here and there, but not always. And when that not always happens, it means that somebody needs to recode something and then maintain it over time. So to me, it does make sense that a specialty app will always win over a super app in the long run, because there is more, if that specialty app can actually develop the features that are related to that specific use case, right? Because what happens is that, and you can see this almost every day at Nostr, they start as a specialty app, and then instead of making the specialty better, they grow like Amethyst does, like by adding other NIPs. And I'm like, well, then you are now competing with me. I can take it, there's not a problem, but I don't think you're going to win for just doing that. You had to make that use case you try to excel on even better and more convincing and more, more fun, whatever the emotional appeal that you are trying to get from it is. And you see this everywhere. You see this with multiple platforms. Like I'm doing an app for Android. I don't touch desktop. I'm not touching iOS. Everybody asks for it. As a dev, I would love to do it because it's something exciting to have multi-platform things going on. But for users, it doesn't matter. My user base is Android. Whoever is using Android today will not just buy an iOS tomorrow. And vice versa, right? Whoever uses an iOS today will not buy an Android device today or tomorrow. So you have your user base, and you can specialize in what that ecosystem gives them, right? So I have to communicate with, the Galaxy Watch and not the Apple Watch. And those are two different interfaces. If you make one app that goes in both ecosystems, you have to make it work for both, right? If you push notifications, for instance, already a mess between iOS and Android. Desktops don't have push notifications. So it's like, how do we even do the same code for all of them? So you can see when devs start to embrace more than what's needed, they start creating these issues for themselves that they become mediocre in all of the spectrum of things they're trying to be, instead of really, really good in just one specialty that they could be. And I do think that this is somewhat of the things we are experiencing with Amethyst now. The amount of features we have is so big that we are dropping the ball in some of the nips because we can't just keep maintaining them. Hopefully we can solve this with more developers and so on. But that's also what I'm trying to tell you, is that I think in the long run, specialty apps, and by specialty I mean this is a use case in one of the platforms. Like this is a use case, like a video feed for Android. This is a desktop chat application. This is an iOS Twitter-like client. If you specialize on those and you do the best you can to increase the engagement of your users and what they can take out of Nostr as a benefit for themselves, for their lives, it can be fun, it can be instructive, it can be so many things. But you have to get that going. Otherwise, you're just going to be a browser. And browsers can be replaced, right? It's just the same thing. You just shift from one to A to B and you get the same page in the end. So to me, it's all about those specialty apps that if I can help build, I will help build, like we have been doing before, just providing as many users because we slightly integrate things without fully replacing them. That is, to me, the end goal. It's like if I can just get this Nostr ecosystem without people giving up on it, so it can keep it growing slowly over time, and let the specialty apps kind of bring new people and bring more diversity to the set of apps we have today, that can be a winning proposition for Nostr, I believe.
I love that mentality, and it is kind of interesting. I think the idea of the super app is very much has sprung from the centralized platforms, right? You look at something like WeChat, right? Like the ultimate super app. I think we would probably all agree on that, at least at this time. X seems to be trying to become a more American version of WeChat, but okay. But that super app mentality comes from the idea that, WeChat's a different story. There's other reasons for them to want to have everybody in one place, but let's take that aside. Look at X, Instagram's a great example, because they've spun off Threads on the top of it, which then also, has photos and videos and everything else. So it's like, okay, it's just a different way to look at that feed. But Instagram itself, they just started out with photos. And then they add stories, as you said, after Snapchat came out. It turns out people love stories. And then they added Reels after TikTok came out. Because what do they want to do? They don't want to lose audience. They want to be able to capture audience, grow audience within their silo, right? They don't want to lose, because they have advertisers who are paying if they can give them more impressions. And that's what it comes down to, right? On Nostr, you don't have that same perverse incentive structure. And so like everyone is used to using a bunch of different applications for different things. This is the whole point of applications, right? This is why you have a bunch on your phone, because you use different apps for different things, and they do that one thing a lot better, and you like it, and that's where you go for whatever that is you want to do. And I think that that's a very powerful kind of message to Nostr developers as well that you just gave, is, you're going to be more successful and ultimately have more control with fewer externalities over your development of your client if it is a micro app, if it is something that is specialized in just doing one thing. Because as you said, otherwise, you can keep up with all, any changes, any new nips, you can keep up with any, maintenance that needs to be done. But the more things you add into your app, that just compounds. The technical debt that you have to repay grows. And so you're making your life harder, you're requiring a higher head count. And that kind of brings me to another point, which is, if you are growing your headcount as a Nostr client, you've got to pay people. Like, there are grants around, which is amazing, through OpenSats, and I think that's fantastic that there's Nostr development being funded through that, among other things. But what do you think, what are your thoughts on just revenue models for clients? And, do you think kind of the paid client of, okay, you pay this much for a year, and whether it's a micro app or a super app, and that's going to give you some extra features, or it's going to provide some extra services. Maybe it's, more data persistence that you get for what you're posting. Maybe it's cloud storage attached to it, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a special badge and that's it. I don't know. But what do you see as the most viable revenue models for Nostr clients? And how do you think about that as the creator of Amethyst as well? What are you thinking about implementing? Because you've got to keep the lights on too,
Yeah. So for us, and I have been open about this for quite some time, I have thought about all these different business models, or the business models we see out there, subscriptions and, rev share and so on. To me, they all have perversive incentives. So for instance, let's pick an app that has, a set of like X has a set of basic features that is all free, and you can subscribe and you get premium features. Well, when you offer something like that, it is natural for the development team, for the sales team, for the marketing team to say, you know what, we're not making money on the free stuff. We should only focus our time and effort on the premium features. And maybe that's the way to go. But very clearly you see that there are two classes of users, and one's getting everything because they're paying for it, and maybe they deserve to get everything. But the free layer is the one that is getting onboarded and getting trained to use the app and experimenting with it. So it's a little bit of perverse incentives in that sense, that you're not actually there because you're not there for yourself. You're there. You might be the product because they're selling you for ads, or there's something there that you're not paying for, which I guess is okay as a free product. Every product has a free layer like this, but it's not really aligned with what users want. It aligns with the premium users and what they want, but not with the free users. The same for relays. Like if you have a free relay right now, the relay operator is not aligned with what you want, because they need money and they need to get to somebody else. And for them is even worse than for apps, because while I only have a development cost and maintenance in the development kind of space, they have operational costs. They cannot keep servers online for free. They have to find money somewhere. If I go on vacations for a month, Amethyst will be there, right? But they don't. So on all these business models, there are some incentives that I really do not like, and that includes subscription, rev share, and all the more, venture-based, models that you see out there. That especially the rev share model for me is like, it's never going to work. Or it might work, but it requires so much, and it requires the level of thinking that only VCs can provide to companies, because you have to reach scale at some point that you just become a bank. And with rev share, you are a bank. I'm sorry, that's what you are. So the app itself is less important. It drives users, But why would you develop something that people are not paying? Just develop the banking part, that do that really well and make sure the cost in that is structured to be minimum for you. So for Amethyst, what I'm trying to do, and I don't know if this is going to work or not, but the early numbers do make some sense. We are exploring this idea of value for value on each release, whereby on each release, I name the developers that participated in that release. I make a release note with everything that's going on. And then when you open the app, there is a little pop that says Zap the devs. And that is just a Zap split to all of them individually. So the money doesn't get to me. It goes to everybody straight up from each one of the users. And they can decide to donate how much they want in there. But there is no give and take. There is no financial relationship. It's not that you are paying for certain features. No, you're not paying for anything. You're paying for the things that you already received. If you like it, you paid. And right now, today, we're getting about $200, $300, some good months, $400 worth of payments. And I think we are so small right now that number, if we grow, it starts to make sense. Even at that scale of like, if it just proportionally stays in that level, in the amount, this is usually like, your top 1-2% of users that will pay for that amount. But if you just scale that, even if it's just 1%, it does work. It does sustain a company with 100 people, 100 devs that can be just churning features and making sure the app is as good as it gets. And that is probably enough for an app like Twitter. Twitter, we know today has 1,000 employees max, and they have to deal with all the government stuff that they have in their books. So I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I don't even have servers. We just need developers. We just need the maintenance of the code, and that relationship needs to be there. And I prefer that users pay the developers directly, because it creates an incentive for devs themselves to participate and to ship cool new things every month. Because of course, if they just keep maintaining the app without adding any new feature, no one's going to pay for that, right? So they have to create new things. They have to make things better. They have to significantly improve the app, maybe add new features, maybe remove new features. But either way, people will actually do that transaction because of the release they just put out. And that seems to be working. It has been working for the past year or so, in numbers that if you just extrapolate from it, it might make sense. We need to see how it grows, but it might make sense. And if we can make that work, that for me is the dream business model. You are paying for the product people are developing for, and if they develop more interesting features to you, you pay more, and they know they got more. There is no one in between. It's not that the money is coming to me first, and then I have to redistribute them, and there is a decision there that might not make everybody happy. No. You are sending money straight to the devs, to everybody in the team. That also includes some tax benefits, because there is no centralized company to get the tax first and then pay out the employees later. So there is some benefits there that, because it's open source and because we don't have operational services, there is literally no liability that anyone can take from this. So you don't actually need a company per se, a legal entity to protect other folks, because we're not even controlling data for people, for instance. And hopefully we remain like that for forever. So that value for value model to me is, if it works, and we think it does, is one of the best things that could come up out of this experiment called Amethyst. And if we can get it to work, I do think we're going to have something better in the end. Of course, everybody else will have a different take on this. I do think the specialty apps can actually charge for the specialty they provide. So for instance, I pay almost $70 a year for the simplified Gmail plugin, which just takes Gmail and changes the HTML to look good. That's the only thing it does. And they're very straightforward. They're like, we're just making your thing better. But we charge that amount per year. And I'm happy to pay for it. So that's the same thing that will happen, I think, with Nostr, which is you might have the Amethyst out there, the free stuff out there, And then there is this very customized client that just say, you know what, we're doing everything they do, but much better. And you were paying for the much better part, not for the feed. The feed is already there. You can watch it from any other place. Ours just so happens to be so much better, then you're going to be willing to pay $70 a year, for instance, for just a better user interface. And maybe that's what triggers some other folks out there to actually develop really, really good UIs where, yeah, you can always go back and use some open source and free things, but if you're really into this, you know where to go. Like if you are, I don't know, if you have a soccer team of your friends that plays here and there every week or so, and you need an app to manage that, manage the space, the payments that everybody goes to each other and so on, maybe there's an app for that. And that app costs, $2-3 a month for just those features. But they do it so well that becomes the app to go. And it just so happens to be, decentralized, self-custodial, and private in the way we all want to see.
I love that. And in that same vein, what's kind of your elevator pitch? You've got a few, a minute or so with a fellow developer who's working on whatever it may be. Maybe they're working on another social media platform. Maybe they're working for some big conglomerate, or maybe they're doing that, but they also do some open source development on the side, but they haven't heard of Nostr. What's your elevator pitch to developers for? Here's why you should develop on Nostr. Here's why you should at least look at it.
So for devs, it's something interesting because it probably doesn't ring a bell with users in general, but it's essentially the fact that the database is solved for you. Like you don't like, because the way devs think is like, if I'm gonna need to build a new system, immediately in my mind, and this comes from our training in computer science, and they tell us to do that really well, which is, I need a sign-in page, I need user and password, I need a database where I know the order of my records and when they come and kind of trust that package of information. And my goal as a developer is to keep that information package tight and very precise to the point that I can do something with it, right? It's like if it's a mess, I can't do anything. So most, if not all, computer scientists are trained to think of like, let's organize our database. Let's make sure this thing makes sense. Especially if you have a bigger team, you have to define how many columns you have in each one of your tables and so on. And those things do have a lot of cost, and they are the most annoying thing to do in computer science. You're looking at it like, oh man, I didn't study 7 years to just, define how many columns in the table should have. It's like, I want to do interfaces. I want to do cool new things. I want to offer new services. But yet you are down there, week after week defining the tables first, and then you have to develop your login system and your credentialing system and all your crypto around those two things, so that then later you can develop what you actually want to develop. You know what I mean? So it's like, with Nostr, in a weekend, you say, just download this library that connects to the relay, and in 2 hours, you can have something displayed on your screen with real data, with stuff that people are already using. This is not a demo database. This is not no, it's real. Like, it's already there. If you decide to post something there, it will show up to other production apps that are available. And you can do that in a few hours. And I think that does not have any other alternative anywhere that can do this so quickly. You can think about blockchains as something equivalent, like use Ethereum and just develop a token and it's all out there, right? But that developing a token takes months on Ethereum because it's so complicated. And you need a token to do kind of everything else. With Nostr, it's like, no, it's just like, you want a new video feed client. If you know how to play videos on the web page, you can do it in a weekend, in a few hours. And that is the power of Nostr, not only for users, but for devs as well. You don't need to worry too much about the database, about caching systems, at least not in the beginning. You can get things going very quickly, and you can test ideas very quickly. I was playing around with that idea of the health data on Nostr just a few days ago. And in one of our meetings, one of the doctors said, you know what, it would be nice to just have like a page that I can fill in my prescription, and I put the npub of my patient and just send it, and they get a GM with my actual prescription there. And I was like, well, that's an hour of work. I built it in that afternoon and shipped it. I was like, is this what you want? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, how? There is nothing else in computer science that can build something that quickly, that integrates a production system that fast.
I mean, that's a compelling pitch, and I'm not even a developer. So no, I love that. I think that is a really powerful thing, that you can be up and running without, you don't need to go and learn a bunch of new stuff either. We're talking about using the existing tools in your own arsenal to be able to go out there and make something meaningful that can attract users and and receive user data, at least, right from the very beginning, which is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And this is like, remember, and the way computer scientists and maybe other folks, other fields of research have the same thing is, for every new product, we kind of know a base price. So you want a new app for Android, I'm going to tell you $50K to the list. Like, this is the minimum to get a viable app that you can actually show to people. On a website is a little bit less, maybe 20K, 15K, and so on for a website that you might be proud of, that you can show to people. In Nostr, 2 hours, 3 hours max, is 1 to 2 people, maybe 3, 4K there in terms of assets and everything, all the images you need to generate and so on. It's so much better, so much faster. And if you are truly a product-centered person, all you want to do is to develop something, put it in the market, test if they like it. If they like it, you keep going with it. If they don't, you shut it down. And 90% of the things you create, they're not going to like. And on the 10% that they might like, you have the decision to make to keep moving forward or not. And because Nostr is so quick, it just becomes the ideal place to run all those experiments. We see in Nostr all the time. This is like, I have a new client that does XYZ, and I just did this in 2 weeks, and so on. It's like, yeah, that's kind of what it takes. And hopefully those things become, the new platforms to develop startups on, that people can actually make a living on this, that people can actually do something interesting. And again, just so happens to be self-custodial, private and decentralized by definition. So people are getting things done because they need to get things done, and just in a way that we all like it to be done,
I love that. This brings me back, because that was an excellent pitch to developers. And this brings me back to kind of users, but more specifically content creators, because I think you and I, just from what you said earlier, we both agree that like what makes people want to be here, wherever here is, whatever, but here is in the Nostr sense, it is the creators that you have. And again, anyone can, the beauty of like the year 2024 is literally anyone can be a creator with this. Like, you have a 4K camera, you have a microphone, you have the ability to edit. Like anyone can be a creator. That's powerful. But obviously, creators that have much larger followings, you look at somebody like Joe Rogan going over to Spotify. There's a reason they paid him an ungodly amount of money to do that, because he is the biggest podcaster in the world. And he will bring people, he will bring his audience with him, because there are millions of people who will listen to every episode that comes out. And it doesn't matter where he's putting those episodes out, they're going to go there because they want to consume his content. So I'm curious, because I also agree with your point 100%, that the key value proposition pitch to like the average content creator, the average person doesn't really care that much about the fact that, it's decentralized, permissionless, censorship resistant. They may care if they get deplatformed. They may care if they get censored, but a lot of them won't, because they toe the line. And so that's not something that they really think about. Yeah, it happens to other people, but not to me. So what is your pitch to the content creators out there who are maybe they haven't heard of Nostr yet. Maybe they have. Maybe they decided to ignore it. But what's your pitch to them for why they should at least try Nostr?
That's a good one. Because my head immediately went into the question of, why are you giving Twitter your content? Why are you giving YouTube your content? Because that's what you're doing. You're making all this thing and then giving out for free to this platform. Yeah, they are paying you, but they're paying close to nothing. And I was like, yeah, sure, you can get users, you can get your name out, because just so happens that right now they have the network effects that you need to grow. But would you do that if they didn't? Would you actually give them your content? I stopped using Twitter for a while now because it didn't really make sense. I was like, why am I even posting on this platform? It's very clear that they're making money on ads, that they are making money on subscriptions, that they now want to charge everyone to just, DM each other. And I'm like, and where is my money? And I was like, I am there providing content. What's the deal, right? So to me, Nostr serves as this valve of like people can just escape into it for now. I don't think this is a long-term pitch because you have to go where the audience is. So if the audience is in a centralized platform, you will go there. There's no question about it. But hopefully over time, we build so many structures and so many interesting things around Nostr where the audience starts to flip back into something like more decentralized like Nostr. It's not going to be overnight. We know from the development of, say, Bitcoin and other decentralized specs that it does take time and enough people need to be engaged, and the tooling around it needs to be good enough to be on par with this massive corporation that has all the cash right now. So it's not gonna be overnight for sure. Like I'm not saying, next year we're gonna have the best streaming platforms on Nostr. No, we're not gonna have. But we're gonna be better than today. And hopefully because that content will stay there for the future, we can start building a library of content and some level of real-time information that might start to make sense for everybody to migrate. And Nostr is one of those things where every little thing helps. So on the idea of the health data that I was just discussing, if I can get my medical records on Nostr, well, now I already have a key. Now I already have an npub. Why won't I just use another Twitter client because I can just reuse the same login I have? I don't need to reinsert everything back again, right? So all those little things, they start to stack on each other. There's something very few people know, but there is a calendar nip on Nostr that just replaces Google Calendar or your calendar preference. There are not many clients out there that support it really well yet. But that's another thing. It's like, if I can just shift this, my daily job, and just start, communicating over Nostr, and then I add an appointment in my calendar on Nostr, and then I have an iCall for calendar that people can book appointments with me in that interface as well. And by the way, this is all free, and they can choose whatever interface they want because I don't really care. It's their choice. This just stacks one on top of the other. And with all of this, if we can get or start to get some content out of these other platforms, then things starts to scale up. I don't ever think we're going to need to get to a place where, we're going to pay Joe Rogan $100 million to come to Nostr. Imagine that, right? Because we're not going to need to. And let me rephrase that. If we are right that this platform about decentralization, self-custodial of keys and privacy, if we are right that this thing is what should drive the world, they are going to come to us. The only variable on all of this is, can we make better apps, better structures, better tooling for the folks participating on it than large corporations out there? And I think we can. We all have seen how, say, Linux have progressed from a, small open source operating system, and now it's on every Android phone. So it's Apple is a free BSD based system, so it's kind of similar but not really. But you can see how open source in the long run wins. But it has won in the past in ways that these companies could hold our information and our identity with them. We just need this little switch that like allows us to keep those things with ourselves while these bigger corporations still make the money they need to make, right? Like, we're not saying that they should stop, like Apple will not stop to exist, right? Like Google will still be there. But Google can index Nostr posts on their search, right? They could use Nostr information in their new AI things. They can do a Nostr client that use those things. That's not going to be more or less, the fact that they're trying to integrate with Nostr is not going to be more or less money to them because of everything else they already have. But it will mean that we are gradually transitioning over to a platform that is just a little bit more decentralized than what we have had in the past.
I think that's such an interesting idea too. And I think, for example, Twitter, I would not be surprised if in a number of years Twitter starts surfacing, or X, excuse me, starts, old habits die hard, starts surfacing.
Today I just said, I had like this speech with Jack Dorsey for quite a while now. I think Jack needs to buy the Twitter brand out of X and re-release Twitter as a new Nostr client, because the brand is so powerful. Everybody keeps using the term tweet and no one is Xing around. They are tweeting, even though the thing is called X now for 6 months. And I'm like, that is power. If we can get that brand and just ship it again as a Nostr product, the brand on itself might be worth the whole thing. It's just, I don't know. So you just used the term tweet. I was like, yeah, that's why we need those things.
Yeah, so Jack, if you end up listening to this, you've now heard the pitch. Get that,
buy the brand,
brand.
Jack. Buy the brand.
Uncage the blue bird again. Let it fly. Set it alongside the purple bird. It's beautiful. No, but that would really be something. I would love to see some retro Twitter UI as well. That would be kind of cool. Like, don't go to the more modern versions of the Twitter UI. Go back to some of the older versions. Give people a little taste of nostalgia in there along the way. I don't know. Now I'm just spitballing. But the other thing I wanted to point out, just because you did mention, the network is very early. The network is very young. The network is still relatively small. It is growing. Yes, it's growing steadily, but it's growing slowly. That's not a bad thing either. We're still in the early adoption phase. But the beauty of that I see for content creators, and this is something that Jeff Booth has done a really good job of explaining actually from his early days using Twitter, is that when you are early to, in this case, in Twitter's case, a platform, but in this case, a protocol, when you are early to a protocol that is being used for social media, of course, there are a lot more applications of Nostr, but right now, like, we're talking about social media use cases, right? But when you're early to a social media protocol, not only do you get the general benefits of being an early adopter, being able to become a power user of this protocol before the masses come in, but as the network grows, as that network effect takes hold, you benefit from that network effect. As the network grows, your following grows in proportion, perhaps not direct proportion, but close to that network growth. That is incredibly powerful, and that is only possible to the extent that you have the ability, like, you're not just benefiting from one application's growth, like on Twitter. You're benefiting from the entire ecosystem. Everything that is being built on Nostr is in service of the user. You are the user. And if you are a user who is also creating, all the tools that are being built, those are in service of you, right? And as the number of users on that network grows, you then are able to capture that network growth that is happening organically around you, and that benefits you. And I think that's incredibly compelling. Again, put the censorship resistance, put the permissionless, decentralized, put all of that aside. We think that's great. Sure. Most people, they don't give a fuck. But you are able to ultimately grow a following that you can take with you anywhere, and all you need is your npub. And your following will grow in proportion to the growth of the network, of the protocol growth. You are benefiting from the network effect of a decentralized open source protocol that can't be shut down. That is incredibly powerful. So even if you don't care about censorship resistance and permissionless and all of that, but you might care about growing your following. And that's something you can do like none other on Nostr because of the structure of an open protocol. And I think that's incredibly powerful, and it should be incredibly compelling to content creators out there. And again, anyone can be a content creator. You're a content creator if you're just publishing your thoughts. If you're just saying, here's my breakfast, #Foodster. You're a content creator too. That's the beauty of having all of this technology in our pockets. And I don't know, I think that's a beautiful thing, and it's a powerful thing. And I think that is what is ultimately, the more people that pick up on that as content creators, I think it's a well-kept secret right now, but not for long. People are going to realize that. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and in this space, you're not going to have a YouTube telling, that other feeds that you might be, other authors that you might be competing with get the premium spot on people's feeds instead of you. There's no centralized determination of who gets to see you what. Every user, they might use an algorithm for this, they might not. Their client might offer, it might not. It's just so diverse that you can't really be based on, I need to just please YouTube to get it to the top spot so that I can actually be the person I'm trying to be as a creator. The fact that the data is virtually open, that anyone can access, that is not centralized behind the doors of, say, Google, it means that this ecosystem of tools has to develop without considering ownership of the data in mind. Meaning anything that they do to make sure there is a differentiator from them to any other application has to be based on anything but the data, which is kind of the opposite that has been happening for the past 20 years, right? Facebook, Google, Instagram, what do they have? They have data. And they just so happens to also do a little bit of UI work here and there, right? That is minimally acceptable for us to give them the data they want. Now in Nostr, that is not there. You can't own people's data. It doesn't work like that. Even if you were a relay operator, people can just move to another relay. It doesn't really work in the way people usually think in the traditional sense. So in a sense, say capitalism will push these apps and these clients forward on the way we want by competing with each other on the best features, the best UI, the best experience, instead of what we don't want, just isolating themselves and the data they capture out from everybody else. That will never happen in Nostr. So you go into this ecosystem, if you believe on this, if you're a creator that minimally understands how this works, like this makes a lot of sense. The only barrier that you would not join Nostr right now is because the other platforms have more users. And they can use that as leverage today. But that's not going to be the case in many years. So it's early. We are still developing many things that we have today. But, those who are starting to get their followers already on Nostr are taking a significant advantage over everybody else because they're going to grow faster. And we all know how network effects happen. It just so happens that on Nostr, the network effects themselves are owned by the creator. They are not owned by YouTube and Google and so on, in the sense that the creator controls what to do with the followers. The creator controls where to take them into multiple relays, multiple different communities, multiple different apps that do different things, that do have slightly different communities that can serve different people within their user base slightly better. They can build cities inside Nostr. They can build just YouTube streams inside Nostr. They can do educational content, and they can have another community for more entertainment content. So it's a thing that if creators usually understand this really well when they start to grow, if you do have your power over your network effects, you are the voice that matters. You are the voice that gets to decide a few things just because you are bigger than everybody else. And hopefully the initial creators we get are also so aligned with this idea of decentralization, privacy, and self-custodial systems that they defend those three flags with all of their users. And we just get to see a massive growth of that user base over time.
Amen. And I may not be the scale of Joe Rogan, but from this humble creator, I can say that I do defend those principles because that does genuinely matter to me, even if it may not matter to the multitude of other creators who will come on here. But I've found it as a content creator in like the actual authentic engagement that you get on Nostr is so much better than what you get on any centralized platform. Like people actually want to have a conversation is what that's the biggest thing you notice. People actually want to engage. It's not just posting a comment under some big account because you want to suck some of their energy out, get some of their followers, to like your comment, maybe follow you, subscribe to you, whatever. No, it's not that. It's that people have genuine questions. They have genuine feedback. I've had people who were nice enough to DM me for some of my earlier episodes, and they're like, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know I love the episode, but your audio levels are really screwed up. Like, you should take a look." It's like, "Oh, thanks. I really don't know what I'm doing, so I need to look into that more because I have not." But it's that kind of stuff, and it's also there is a genuine the value for value model. While I think it's still very much in its early stages, and it's amazing that you're doing that with Amethyst from the development side. And I also think that it's something for content creators. It actually encourages you to be your most authentic self. Yeah. Because people don't want to zap inauthentic bullshit. They want to zap things that are from the heart, that are said from a place of truth, not a place of lies. They want to zap things that make them feel good. If you implemented zaps tomorrow on Twitter, on X, I'll never get Twitter out of my head. If you implemented zaps tomorrow, by the brand. But if you do this tomorrow on X, it would be so interesting to see all of the rage bait, all of the doom porn, all of the just negativity that gets so much engagement on there. I don't think it would get a lot of zaps. I don't think it would get a lot of actual real world monetary value sent to it. That kind of engagement bait only works because it's an advertising first model. And if you take that away and you make it to a value for value model, value becomes that algorithm. Value becomes the signal. And people they don't really want to send you money when you made them feel like shit, turns out. Who knew? Shocking. Who knew? But so I think that's a beautiful thing. And I want to be...
And by the way, if you take Nostr today and you do a trending topic by trending topics by reactions, the likes, all the emojis and so on that people are sending to each other, and a trending topics by zaps, you will see that they rarely match. So even in a place where we don't have as much, negativity, I would call it, you already see a big difference between the two. There are people that have large networks that can get a large amount of reactions and replies and so on to themselves, but only because they are large. And then you have all this, I would call them mid-level creators that are getting all the zaps because they are actually saying things that people felt comfortable paying for. That is not only about the size of their follower base, but it's about what they actually say and what they actually put down on the text that they are writing. So you see that even today with Nostr already. Forget about all the negativity stuff. It's like Nostr is beautiful because you can explore all these models, and you can say, what matters to me is the zap amount. And I'm going to go after that because I think that's my biggest, that's the way I'm going to make money. but also that's how I perceive that my users are seeing value on this. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to go after reactions because I'm a comedy person and I want to get laughs out. I don't really care about the money, I care about, the things. So those are two different models. Today, if you turn up YouTube or Twitter, you can't decide if you want either or. Like, no, you have to follow whatever they say. In Nostr, you can just be yourself and play with the type of feature that kind of means the most to you.
That's really beautifully said.
And by the way, I'm going to make a challenge to you, which I just had an idea.
Okay.
I think this conversation must be on Zapstream.
Okay.
And you can place it live and then later release the video with all the edits.
Okay.
So you can get all the value for value services going on, say on the Zapstream, and then you can get the more refined version of the content later on.
So
you can cut this out if you want later, but it's up to you.
No. I leave it from start to finish. I leave it all in because I don't want to ever be seen as somehow censoring my own content. But what I do right now, my workflow is basically I upload the full length long form videos. So an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it ends up being. I upload those to satellite.earth/CDN. So I pay for that hosting in Bitcoin, which is great. And you pay a rate based on how much data you need stored there. I then post them through Highlighter. So I go to, highlighter.com. I post the video. Pablo's done a really nice job with that because, it lets me upload thumbnails and tags and all of that. As soon as I post from there, it's immediately available on flare.pub. Which I'm not sure how much folks are using as much anymore, but it's actually a really nice interface for viewing content. I'm very impressed with that. And then I'll post short.
Do you place
links,
the YouTube link on Flare or the actual file, like an MP4 file of the video?
Because it's hosted on satellite.earth, as soon as I publish that through Highlighter, it's automatically on Flare, and that's the beauty of Nostr. I don't have to do anything else. It's just there. Like it's good to go. It's up there on Flare and any other Nostr clients in the future that are going to implement, that are also, going to be pulling those events. So that's what I love about it, is that it's so darn easy for me from a workflow perspective. So when I do that on Nostr, again, I'm uploading the full video, I'm posting it all to Highlighter, it's going to Flare, it's going to wherever else. There are probably some other clients that are pulling it up in that same way for long form videos that I'm not even aware of. When I still post the videos on YouTube and I put them on Rumble as well. And that's just a pain in the ass because I need to individually upload them and post them to both. So they're hosted through both of those. And that's just difficult. I love what Fountain has been doing. The fact that Fountain has basically become a Nostr client is really cool. And they pull in not just, now they've made it so they pull in not just Fountain episodes that will be surfaced in Fountain, but they've made it so that any sort of audio media that is posted, so if you post a Spotify link on Nostr, and you post an Apple Podcast link on Nostr, it pulls all of that into Fountain, which I think is great because they're looking at it again as not just a media player for podcasts, but as a content discovery tool enabled by Nostr. And I think that's really powerful. So I have not used Zapstream yet because I don't do live stuff, but I know I can upload it to there, I think, and still do like a replay of it. But,
well, the idea is to use the live chat to get you some live interaction, and then maybe because they do have a very nice value for value kind of proposition during the live chat. So we could be talking to, the folks that are listening to us right now, if this was live, and they could send questions and so on, and you can present them. There are many things that can happen because it's live, which might trigger how you're going to actually resolve your audio and your studio setup. But if you can do it, I think it's going to be great. And the thing that I'm going to promise you to do is the flare.pub videos, they are supposed to show on Amethyst Real already today. Not sure why they're not showing yours, but I will check why. Because if there is a file there and not just a link to YouTube, because we don't show YouTube, then it should show even today. So it becomes, even if it's an hour-long episode, it will show up there for people to watch.
Okay, that's awesome. I've been debating having like a Nostr interoperability panel on this show one of these times, and get like you and Pablo and maybe Milian and Will together and have a little panel. That one we would have to do on Zap.stream. Maybe also host it on as a Nostr Nest. So we go the whole, run the gamut there. But no, that's the beautiful thing. Like if I can publish again just via highlighter, because I like the highlighter interface.
Right.
They make it very easy. I can upload my thumbnail and whatnot too, and then it's available in multiple locations. I don't need to go and post it where the users are. The users are wherever they want to be. They'll find it. It'll come to them, and that's such a powerful thing about Nostr.
And the beauty is, like, you were using Highlighter, which is one of the creator tools. Highlighter is more of a creator tool than a viewer tool,
Yeah.
And if they start providing additional features that can increase your reach, or can it just make your videos better automatically somehow, those things are worth paying for. And if you are out there and you're thinking about developing a solution like that, there's people waiting. There's people like you, like lots of other streamers that are just waiting to get into the game. They just want to have the same quality they had in other platforms back on Nostr. And if you can provide that in a nice enough user interface for now, just to start, I do think a lot of new content will just start to show up. Content that is, native to Nostr, as opposed to just a link to YouTube, a link to this, a link. No. Let's make sure, we own everything, and everything is signed and verifiable, and you can actually control what you do.
Amen. And that's the power of it, right? It's that interoperability, but it's also the verifiability to know that, yeah, this really came from that content creator. Like this, I know their NPub. It's a beautiful thing. And I want to be conscious of your scarce time here, because I know we've run for a while. Is there anything you wanted to dig into today that we didn't get a chance to? Have we done? We didn't talk about really algorithms or discoverability. We may have to save that for another conversation. But is there anything else that you wanted to get into that we didn't get a chance to, or anything you want to talk about with Amethyst specifically, or Nostr generally?
So the latest feature for Amethyst that we have been very excited about is this integration with the Tor network. So the next version of Amethyst will ship with a Tor browser baked into the device, the app, so that you don't need to use any external VPN or any other service to connect into Tor. And the way we are doing this, and we realized only later that this could be beneficial for users, is not that the app will work only inside Tor, which loading images and loading videos in Tor is a little bit more difficult because it takes longer and so on. But it will be used side by side with the ClearNet connection. So for most of the relay communication that Amethyst needs to do, that new version now will hide your IP from all the relays out there. So it's one last tracking point that people can use to link, interest with your pub keys, and then sell what you're interested on to some other folks. So they can do less. It's not perfect by any means, but we are getting to this point, and I think Tor is getting there. Some other privacy networks are getting there as well, that what they can provide is good enough that we can ship an app with enabled defaults that already use them. So Amethyst, for instance, will ship with Tor enable for all users. And if they want, they can disable it, but by default, it will be enabled. And because it will be enabled, I think now we can start to have a different conversation in Nostr, which is, does it really make sense to have relays on a ClearNet? Or why don't we just move them all into Tor? And I'm not sure if you know how Tor works, but Tor is this thing where if it needs to leave the network, the Tor network, and into the real web to access a website in outside Tor, that site will know the exit point on Tor. So the exit computer will be known to everybody. If the relay is providing services inside of Tor directly, there is no way to figure out what's what. So it becomes much better from a privacy standpoint to just serve content strictly inside the Tor network. And for users and apps that can provide that connection as a default, which Amethyst will start doing and hopefully other people will follow, now everything is more private, more close to its ecosystem, which is this Tor Onion framework design that they have. And it's just, that slightly better of an approach than before. And hopefully this becomes a standard that other apps will follow. I haven't seen many apps shipping Tor-enabled content by default, but now it is really possible. And Amethyst will start doing it. Hopefully other Nostr apps will start doing it. So hopefully we have some relays now moving their content to be inside of the Tor network, so there is no exit node. No one can track them. No one can see that this thing's coming out of the Tor network. And we can just enhance the entire network by this little decision to make it a default for by default it is enabled. So if you have a Tor relay, you will use the regular ClearNet relay and the Tor relay at the same time. You don't need to choose where you want. You know how in browser you can choose, like, go to the incognito mode, and some sites that you remember, you can turn that on and so on. With Amethyst, that's just the default. And the app will kind of choose which way to go based on your settings and based on the level of trust you place on the relay. So if you say, you know what, relays XYZ are my relays, I know them very well, they are in my list, those are trusted. You don't need to use Tor for those things, so it's a little bit faster to get that information. But for everything else, if you need to connect to anything else, it's still Tor. And I don't want to know like what's happening behind the scenes. I just want to know it's private. And no one can trace me because of that access.
I love that because it's making privacy. It's privacy by default. It's convenient privacy for the user who may not otherwise take the necessary steps to guard their own privacy. But this is something that you're building in at the application layer so that they have, the option is not only there, but it's on by default. It's saying, yeah, we're gonna make this more private for you, and you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to be technically inclined to figure this out. We're just going to do it. And I hope that more clients move toward that kind of model, because again, I think anytime you can make privacy easier for the user or on by default, that's ultimately better for that individual user, but also for the entire network.
And to the point of the onboarding procedures we mentioned before, we're not going to cite the Tor name anywhere, meaning in the settings, sure. But like if you're creating an account, there's not going to be a mention to Tor. We're not going to mention that this is a private client. This is just a regular client that just so happens to take privacy into consideration and ships it by default. So that is what I think, like that type of change to me is what regular users really want. I don't want to choose to have the private, app, whatever that is. I want an app. And if it is private, it's better. So like just do the thing that you're supposed to do. Be private. Be as private and as decentralized, as self-custodial as you can. But give me the features I want, because I just care about the features. So the funny thing is, like on our new user creation screens, we really are not going to talk about privacy at all, because that's not the point. You're not there to discuss how private your posts are. You're there to post. They just so happen to be private. So it's hopefully that gets ingrained into other apps, and other people start seeing that framework as viable. Again, this is just because the Tor folks did release a really good library a few months or maybe a year ago that truly allows us to do that now with any application in your phone. You can just ship with Tor enable and on by default. So if you care about these types of things, you can just give that to your user almost free of any friction that you might otherwise have in the past from this idea of, I have to choose the incognito mode, and like, no, just do it by default, and people will use it, and there might be some issues in the beginning, but we're going to figure those things out. And if we can get it going in a way that, like I said, Tor is a little bit slower, so if it doesn't get too slow that it becomes perceivable to a user, then I think it's a win for everybody.
I think that's awesome. Again, the fact that it's privacy by default is really powerful. And even though users may not, a lot of them may not care about that as much, there may come a day when they do care about that very much. And to find out that that's already on for them, that's already, like, nobody's going to be mad that a developer made the decision to make things more private. You're going to be mad if you find out the developer was actually making things specifically not private and selling your data and doing whatever else. Nobody's mad when they find out that somebody is making an experience more private for them. So I think that's beautiful. And again, I want to thank you, because this was really enjoyable. My wheels are turning. You've got me now encouraged to also do a Zap stream one of these times. Even though I'm not a big live show guy, I may just have to do it. But where do you want to send people? I mean, they should search Amethyst. If they're using Android, go to search Amethyst in the Play Store. Anywhere, I'll include your NPub in the show notes. Anywhere else you want to send people?
No, it's just amethyst.social. If you want to try nostrapps.com, has the entire directory made by Carnage, I believe, that lists all the apps and all different things you can try out with Nostr. Most of them that are on that list are really good, really refined, are working really well. So you're not going for, first level, first version kind of designs. Things that are already up and going, like we were discussing, we have streams in Nostr, we have videos in Nostr, we have so many different things now in Nostr. And they're already ready to be used. This is not, version 1.0. They're ready to go. So go search for it. And if you have any questions, use the network to ask the questions, because we're all there and we can see you.
Amen. Yeah. Don't be a stranger. Use that introductions hashtag. Say hello when you come and join Nostr. And I think once people start using Nostr, they realize that something feels a little bit different. And they can't quite put their finger on it, but it feels different. It feels better. It feels like a change, and a positive one. And I think, again, to one of your earlier points, like, we win by providing a better experience. And I think already we're getting to that point. It's been incredible to see the development in just a couple of short years. It's going to be insane to look back 5 years from now and see where we're at. But we got a little ways to go until then. But I want to thank you for building open source solutions. And we'll go out there now and zap some notes, send some notes, make some memes, have a good time, and I'll see you out there on the relays.
Yeah, let's have some fun.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net/sponsor. If you're enjoying the Bitcoin Podcast, consider giving the show a 5-star review wherever you listen, or sharing the show with your friends, family, and strangers on the internet. Or don't, Bitcoin doesn't care, but I always appreciate it. You can find me on Nostr by going to primal.net/walker. If you want to follow the Bitcoin Podcast on Twitter, go to @TitcoinPodcast and @WalkerAmerica. You can also find the video version of this podcast at youtube.com/@WalkerAmerica and @WalkerAmerica on Rumble. Or just go to bitcoinpodcast.net/podcast and find links everywhere. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.